Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the channel Biblical Chronicles. If you are new here, kindly subscribe the channel. This verse refers to a mysterious event that is not recorded elsewhere in the Bible. However, some early Jewish traditions, such as in the apocryphal book The Assumption of Moses, suggest that there was a supernatural conflict over Moses' body. While the exact details are unclear, here are some interpretations. Why did Satan want Moses' body? To prevent his resurrection or use the body for deception. Some scholars suggest that Satan may have wanted to prevent Moses from being resurrected or honored by God. Others think Satan might have wanted to use Moses' body as an object of worship to lead Israel into idolatry. Satan accusing Moses of sin. Satan is called the accuser, Revelation 12:10, and he might have argued that Moses, because of his sin, striking the rock instead of speaking to it in Numbers 20:8-12, did not deserve a proper burial or resurrection. God's plan for Moses' future role. Moses later appears with Elijah during Jesus' Transfiguration, Matthew 17:1-3. Some believe God had a special plan for Moses even after his death, and Satan wanted to interfere with that plan. What did Michael the archangel do? Michael did not argue with Satan but instead said, "The Lord rebuke you." This shows that victory over Satan comes through God's power, not human strength. Satan contended for Moses' body. The story of Satan contending for Moses' body is found in Jude 1-9, where the archangel Michael confronts Satan in a supernatural dispute. Though the Bible does not provide extensive details, this verse reveals a significant moment of spiritual warfare, demonstrating Satan's ongoing efforts to oppose God's plans and people. Biblical context. Moses, the great leader of Israel, died on Mount Nebo, Deuteronomy 34-5-6, after leading the Israelites through the wilderness for 40 years. The Bible explicitly states that God himself buried Moses, and no one knows his burial place to this day. Deuteronomy 34-6. This secrecy surrounding Moses' burial may be one reason why Satan sought his body up. It was an unusual case where a human leader was buried by God. Why did Satan want Moses' body? To lead Israel into idolatry. Moses was Israel's greatest prophet and leader, and if his body were found, the Israelites might have venerated or even worshipped it. Throughout their history, the Israelites struggled with idol worship, such as the golden calf incident, Exodus 32. Satan may have wanted to use Moses' remains as a relic to turn Israel's devotion away from God. To prevent God's future plan, Moses appears alive alongside Elijah during Jesus' Transfiguration, Matthew 17:1-3. Some believe that this future role required divine preservation of Moses in some form, and Satan may have sought to interfere with this purpose. To accuse Moses of sin. Satan is called the accuser of the brethren, Revelation 12:10. He may have argued that Moses, due to his past sins, such as striking the rock instead of speaking to it in Numbers 20:8-12, did not deserve an honorable burial or resurrection. Michael's victory over Satan. Instead of engaging in a direct argument with Satan, Michael relied on divine authority, saying, "The Lord rebuke you." This statement emphasizes that only God has ultimate power over life and death. It serves as a lesson for believers that spiritual battles should be fought with God's power, not human effort. This event highlights the cosmic struggle between good and evil, revealing that Satan actively seeks to disrupt God's plans but ultimately fails. It also underscores the mystery surrounding Moses' death and burial, showing that God sovereignly protects his chosen servants even beyond the grave. Possible reasons for the conflict. The dispute between Satan and the archangel Michael over the body of Moses, as mentioned in Jude 1-9, raises several questions. The Bible does not provide explicit details, but biblical scholars and Jewish traditions offer possible reasons why Satan sought Moses' body. Here are some key explanations. 1. To lead Israel into idolatry. One of the strongest possibilities is that Satan wanted to use Moses' body to lead Israel into idolatry. Throughout their history, the Israelites repeatedly struggled with idol worship. They venerated objects such as the golden calf, Exodus 32, and later even the bronze serpent that Moses made, Numbers 21-9, which they worshipped until King Hezekiah destroyed it, 2 Kings 18-4. If Satan had gained control over Moses' body, He could have used it to encourage the people to build a shrine or a cult of worship, drawing them away from God. This may explain why God personally buried Moses and ensured that no one knew his burial place. Deuteronomy 34:6. 2. To prevent God's future plan, Moses played a crucial role in biblical history and was honored by God beyond his death. In Matthew 17:1-3, Moses appears alongside Elijah during Jesus' Transfiguration. This suggests that God had an important future purpose for Moses, possibly related to his prophetic role. Satan, who constantly opposes God's plans, may have tried to interfere with this divine arrangement. If he could have corrupted or desecrated Moses' body, he might have attempted to prevent his later appearance and participation in God's work. 3. To accuse Moses of sin. Satan is described as the accuser of the brethren, Revelation 12:10. He constantly seeks to condemn God's people by highlighting their sins. Moses, despite being a faithful servant of God, had moments of failure. One significant sin was when Moses struck the rock instead of speaking to it, as God commanded, Numbers 20:8-12. Because of this, Moses was denied entry into the promised land. Satan may have argued that Moses, as a sinner, did not deserve an honorable burial or resurrection. However, God's mercy prevailed, and he personally handled Moses' burial. Michael's response in Jude 1-9. The archangel Michael confronts Satan over the body of Moses, but instead of engaging in a direct battle or argument, he simply declares, "The Lord rebuke you." This response is both significant and instructive, revealing how spiritual authority operates in battles between good and evil. 1. Michael did not rebuke Satan personally. Michael is one of the most powerful angels mentioned in the Bible. He is identified as a warrior angel who fights for God's people. Daniel 10:13, Revelation 12:7. Despite his power, he did not personally rebuke Satan. Instead, he invoked God's authority, saying, "The Lord rebuke you." This demonstrates that even the most powerful angels do not act on their own strength or authority but rely entirely on God's power. If Michael, a mighty archangel, did not attempt to challenge Satan directly, how much more should humans depend on God in spiritual battles? 2. The power of divine authority. Michael's words show that spiritual authority comes from God alone. Instead of engaging in debate or conflict, he left the matter in God's hands. This aligns with biblical principles that emphasize the Lord's sovereignty over Satan. Zechariah 3:2. By saying, "The Lord rebuke you," Michael acknowledges that it is God who has the ultimate power to judge, rebuke, and defeat Satan. This reminds believers that spiritual warfare is not about human strength but about trusting in God's authority. 3. A lesson for believers in spiritual warfare. Michael's response serves as an example for believers when they face spiritual opposition. The Bible warns that Satan seeks to accuse, deceive, and destroy. John 8:44, 1 Peter 5-8, Revelation 12:10. However, believers are not called to fight Satan with their own words or power but to stand firm in God's authority. Ephesians 6:10-12 teaches that our battle is not against flesh and blood but against spiritual forces. Believers are to put on the full armor of God and trust in His power, not their own. 4. The victory belongs to God. Michael's refusal to engage in argument with Satan demonstrates that God alone determines the outcome of spiritual battles. No matter how cunning or powerful Satan appears, he is ultimately subject to God's judgment. Michael's response, "The Lord rebuke you," shows that Satan's schemes are powerless against God's will. God's sovereign plan. The dispute between Michael the archangel and Satan over Moses' body, Jude 1-9, ultimately highlights God's sovereign plan over life, death, and the destiny of His people. Despite Satan's attempts to interfere, God ensured that His purpose for Moses would be fulfilled. This event serves as a powerful reminder that God is in control, even in matters beyond human understanding. 1. God personally buried Moses. One of the most unique aspects of Moses' death is that God Himself buried him. Deuteronomy 34:5-6. Unlike other biblical figures, whose burial sites were known and honored, Moses' grave remained a mystery. This suggests that God had a specific reason for keeping Moses' body hidden. If the Israelites had access to his grave, they might have worshipped Moses instead of God. By keeping the burial place unknown, God prevented idolatry and ensured that Moses remained a spiritual leader rather than a religious relic. This shows God's foresight and sovereignty in protecting his people from falling into sin. 2. Moses' role in the Transfiguration. God's plan for Moses extended beyond his earthly life. In Matthew 17:1-3, Moses appeared with Elijah during Jesus' transfiguration. This event demonstrated that Moses was not abandoned in death but had a continuing role in God's redemptive story. Moses represented the law, while Elijah represented the prophets, both pointing to Jesus as the fulfillment of God's plan. This suggests that Moses had a unique destiny, which Satan may have tried to prevent. By ensuring Moses' body was protected, God guaranteed that his plan for Moses' future appearance alongside Jesus would not be hindered. 3. Satan's defeat and God's authority. Satan, as the accuser, Revelation 12:10, likely sought to claim Moses' body as a means of disrupting God's plan. However, God's authority prevailed. Michael, rather than engaging in an argument, simply declared, "The Lord rebuke you." Jude 1-9. This shows that God alone has control over life and death. Job 1:21. Satan cannot override God's will, no matter how much he opposes it. God's purposes will always be fulfilled, regardless of spiritual opposition. 4. A lesson in trusting God's plan. The story of Moses' body reminds believers that God's plan is greater than human understanding. Even when Satan schemes against God's people, his efforts are ultimately futile. Just as God protected Moses' body and future role, he watches over his people and ensures that his sovereign will prevails. Conclusion: victory belongs to God. The story of Michael and Satan disputing over Moses' body is a powerful reminder that God's authority is absolute, and no force, human or demonic, can thwart his divine plan. Despite Satan's attempts to manipulate, accuse, or interfere, he was ultimately rebuked and rendered powerless before God's sovereign will. Moses' hidden burial, his later appearance at the Transfiguration, and the angelic battle over his body all point to a profound truth: God alone controls life, death, and destiny. Even in unseen spiritual warfare, God's power prevails. Michael did not argue with Satan but simply declared, "The Lord rebuke you," demonstrating that victory comes not through human strength but through trust in God's authority. This story is not just about Moses, it is a lesson for all believers. It reminds us that Satan is real, accusations will come, and battles will be fought, but ultimately, God's purposes will stand. No matter the opposition, no matter the schemes of the enemy, God's sovereign plan will be fulfilled, and his people will remain secure in his hands. The final victory belongs to the Lord.